So without reading this, so what you're saying is, that's what I'd like to
There's only 12 things you need to know in life, right? That's it?
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
This interview that you just did with this woman, Kathy Newman, was that in the UK?
It was Channel 4, UK.
I just went, I felt bad, but I was also laughing. I went to her Twitter page to read, and with each one of her tweets, no matter what she says, someone writes underneath it, so what you're saying is, and then some ridiculous, but by the way, your fans were mocking her, but politely, non-aggressively. I didn't read any rude things. Like there was no insults, or maybe a few insults, but there's no swears. It was just playful mocking of the interview that she did with you, because the interview was ridiculous. It was a ridiculous interview. I mean, I listened to it or watched it several times. I was like, this is so strange. It's like her determination to turn it into a conflict. It's one of the issues that I have with television shows.
Yeah.
Because they have a very limited amount of time, and they're trying to make things as salacious as possible. They want to have these sound bites, these clickbait sound bites. And she just went into it incredibly confrontational, not trying to find your actual perspective, but trying to force you to defend a non-realistic perspective.
Yes, well, I was the hypothetical villain of her imagination, essentially. Yeah. Well, what happened, what was interesting, too, the way it played itself out, because I met her in the green room beforehand. She was being made up, and then they put a little bit of powder on me, and we had a friendly kind of interchange, and then we went and sat in front of the cameras and for a couple of minutes, before the show got rolling, and we had a pretty pleasant back and forth. And then as soon as the cameras went on, she was a completely different person. And I thought, oh, I see. I see what's going on.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, so that kind of alerted me to, the fact that there was something rotten in the state of Denmark, let's say. Yeah, but, this is also why YouTube is going to kill TV. Because television, by its nature, all of these narrow broadcast technologies, they rely on forcing the story, right? Because it has to happen now. It has to happen often in 5 minutes, because they only broadcast 5 minutes of that interview. They did put the whole thing up on YouTube.
To their credit.
Yeah. It hasn't ceased to amaze me yet. I think that they thought that the interview went fine. That's the scuttlebutt I've got from sort of behind the scenes, because I know some people who know what's going on at Channel 4, and they're shell-shocked by the response. And then, of course, there was the counter response. The Guardian the next day published an article saying that, the head of Channel 4 had to call in police security because of threats. Well, first of all, you can call the police in about anything.
Always.
That's good.
My friend, it's just strange times, and we're both departing this land.
I know.
For greener pastures.
I keep thinking back to when we first became friends, and the strange path since from there to here, and all our predictions and all the things that we never would have imagined this, specifically like that there would be this fucking global pandemic, that we would suddenly be like some kind of refugee is way too dramatic a word for it, but suddenly just part of this diaspora of comedians pouring out of LA, and not just comedians, but just people leaving, man.
Well, I talked to Joey today from New Jersey. I called him. He's in New Jersey, and it was just so strange. I'm like, you're in Jersey? He's like, that's right, motherfucker.
Yeah.
He's all happy in Jersey.
He was the last. You leaving was intense, but I was still maybe we'll stick around and see what happens. And then, I'd been getting all these, the problem with me is, I get weird vibes all the time. And, the last I was on here, I legitimately thought a meteor was going to hit the Earth. I really thought that. So I work very hard on not listening to that part of me most of the time. But I was getting this real weird vibe from LA. And I'm like, come on, man. You're just, superstitious. It's probably nothing. And then then my wife would say, like, I'm getting a really weird vibe. Like, maybe I don't know if we should stay here renting, if we should stay in the place. And I didn't want to tell her, oh, I've been getting a weird vibe too, because I didn't want to amplify whatever that was. And then I got on the phone with Diaz, and he's like, yeah, I'm leaving, getting the fuck out of here. And that was it. That's
Diaz was telling me Burbank was sketchy. Where he lives in Burbank, 'cause my neighborhood turned to shit, like instantly.
Dude, it's like, yeah, it's not, and it's not just any one thing. You know, it's like not just like some of the stuff stuff had to get shut down, and because stuff was shut down, it got a little more weathered than usual. And it's like the homeless encampments. I was in Echo Park, man, and like I really feel like, like the red state people, one of the things they love to tweet is like, don't bring your liberal bullshit here, right? And
they're
like,
right.
Well, that's where I'm eating shit a little bit because, I do still believe that we need to decriminalize drugs, that the drug policy is bullshit, the way we're handling it's all wrong. But there used to be a way that they could get people who are like camping out on the streets. And a lot of the times that was possession of like illegal drugs. And because that stuff got removed, suddenly you were witnessing like, holy shit, man, there's people who are making like real, a rational decision from the perspective of a heroin addict, which is they love heroin so much. You know that Doug Stanhope joke, some things are better than life? Mm-hmm. Like they love heroin so much. They're addicted to it. They love it. And the shelters that are apparently available won't let them do drugs in the shelters.
They want you to kick it.
Yeah. And so that's ridiculous. But now I could be wrong about that, but that is what I've heard is one of the reasons these people are staying out in the street is not because they don't want to be in a shelter. It's because they don't want to be prevented from getting high. Yeah. And so this has produced this like situation in a lot of the big cities, which is we're seeing like massive tent cities. And by the way, the tent city thing aesthetically, it's not the best look, but the stuff that I began to experience in Echo Park, man, I took my kid to the playground, right? And there's like a dude that looks like he emerged from a time portal from an apocalypse. You know what I mean? I'm not talking about like, run of the mill, like somebody who's a junkie, who's like, I'm talking like covered in like soot, like pure dilated eyes, not wearing like, the disheveled clothes you might expect from someone who's been addicted to heroin for a long time, but like wearing like he broke into wherever the costumes from Mad Max were, like some kind of weird leather vest thing and like creepy fucking cut off shorts, and he had a machete.
Oh, Jesus.
And he's
Christ.
throwing it into the ground of the playground and pulling it out like he's practicing throwing a machete. I'm with my fucking toddler, man. And, it's like, and so obviously we didn't go to the playground, but that was, it was not uncommon in that area to see completely naked people. Just not that that's bad, but not naked like the way
covered in dirt, wandering aimlessly. Yeah,
even worse than wandering aimlessly, wandering with what seems to be a purpose in their eyes. Some of them seeming like they're late. Where the fuck are you going naked that you're late for? Like, are you being summoned?
Because of threats. Well, first of all, you can call the police in about anything. And they never did detail out exactly what the threats were. But then about 20 newspapers picked that up and went for Kathy Newman is now being harassed by an army of online trolls for doing nothing but doing her job, which, and then there was a backlash against that in the press. And so it's been
someone took an audit of the actual interchanges that between fans and her, and there was way more negative ones coming your way.
Yes, that were seriously negative. Yeah, that's right.
Seriously negative, violent, harassing, just rude. There were way more. Yeah, and no one picked up on that at all. It was all the narrative was she's a victim. Yeah, even though she was highly aggressive in this, but.
She's a funny victim. It's not like she's not successful. Yeah. It's like at some point you think you should have to hand in your victim card. I think like when you go to an Ivy League university, it's like right then and there. You get to hand in. Yeah, because you don't get to be oppressor and oppressed at the same time. That's just too much.
Well, one of the things that you pointed out was when you were talking about competition for very lucrative jobs, and you were saying, look what you've done. Like, you must have had to work here. And she proudly was saying how hard she had to work to get there. I'm like, well, yes, of course. No one's going to hand this to you.
No,
this
definitely
is why,
not.
And this is why you were saying you are opposed to equality of outcome.
Equality of outcome. I can't imagine anything we could possibly strive for in our society that would make it into hell faster than equality of outcome. Like the historical evidence for the pathology of that route is so strong. It's like you have to be historically ignorant beyond belief, or malevolent or resentful beyond comprehension in order to think that that's a good idea, to argue for that.
I agree with you, but I think that even if you came into this with no knowledge of history, but a complete understanding of human beings, you would say, well, that doesn't make any sense. And one of the best quotes that I've ever read about it is that if you have real, true freedom, you're never going to have equality of outcome. Because with real, true freedom, you have the freedom to not engage. Well, look, if you look at a guy like Jeff Bezos, for instance, that Amazon guy who's worth more money than anybody ever, right? That guy works all day.
Yeah.
I mean, he's a maniac.
Oh, yeah.
He's acquiring all these different companies, and everything he's doing is designed to succeed.
Yeah.
I mean, he's just
Well, that's what Gates just said,
yes.
too, in a recent interview. And I know some guys that are, they're in approximately the same universe as those two, and they just work all the time.
That's all they do.
All the time.
Yeah.
And they don't just work. They work so efficiently and so effectively and make use of every second in ways you can't even imagine unless you're in that sort of position. So, and doing that doesn't mean that you will succeed, but not doing it certainly means that you will fail.
Well, not doing it certainly means you will never achieve that level of success, and that's what we're talking about. We're talking about equality of outcome.
Yeah.
I don't want that. I don't want to be that guy. I don't want to work like that. I don't want to do what he's doing, and I should have the freedom to not do that.
Yeah.
As he should have the freedom to do that. If we're going to play this game called capitalism, which we're all agreeing is probably, at least in as far as the models that we have right now, is the best one that we have. If we're all going to play this game, if someone decides to be the Michael Jordan of capitalism, you can't stop them. You can't say, no, you're playing this game too well. You're playing this game too hard. You're too obsessed with this game. You're going to have that.
Yeah, you can stop them. You can try to stop people from winning crookedly,
yes.
which is what you should do. And,
yes.
There's a couple of things that are really worth delving into with regards to that, too, because there's this sort of Marxist notion that all this inequality is generated as a consequence of capitalism. And that's actually technically false. Because if you look at, there seems to be something like a law of nature that's described by this statistical model called the Pareto distribution. And it basically suggests that in any creative domain, there's going to be a small number of people will do almost all of the output. But it doesn't just apply to human beings. It applies to the heights of trees in the Amazon rainforest. It applies to the size of cities, and it applies to the mass of stars, and it's something like the more you have, the more you get. It's something like, you can imagine how that would work with a star. As it gets bigger and bigger and its gravitational mass increases, it's going to attract more and more matter. And then as a city grows, well, more and more people are excited to move there because of all the opportunities. And so some cities start to grow tremendously and others don't. But this phenomena where a small number of people end up controlling a tremendous proportion of the resource is not only limited to money, and it doesn't only occur in capitalist societies. It occurs everywhere. It's like a natural law. So you see the same thing with number of points scored by a spectacular sports figure. There's always a tiny proportion of people who are way ahead on the curve, or people who make records, or people who sell paintings, or people who compose music, or people who sell music online. It's all the same. It's the 1% gets 80%. And so, well, first, we can't blame that on capitalism. And second, we should note that it actually does constitute a problem, which is what the left-wingers are always jumping up and down about, right? Like, too much inequality starts to destabilize your society. And it isn't obvious how to shovel money from the top end, maybe the 1/10 of 1% who have almost all the money, down to the people who have almost nothing in a way that's effective so that they don't get thrown out of the game completely and so that the whole society doesn't destabilize. We don't exactly know how to do that. It is a problem because inequality does exist and it does tend to magnify across time.